Could the Blue Jackets add to their small but mighty Russian mafia in this year's upcoming NHL draft? Maybe. And we're going to talk about who they could add and why in just a minute here on Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on Sirius XM. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There's no I in it. There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Like I said at the top of the show, we've got Sebastian High back to talk about another prospect profile. We're really going to be ramping these up as the draft gets closer and closer. It's like 5 weeks away at this point, which is a little bit scary. But we're talking about Igor Chernyshov today, who is another guy that is kind of in the top 15 of most people's mock draft, but I don't see anyone talking about him. And so I wanted to know why that was. So we're going to talk to Sebastian about that. And we're also going to check in with Gavin Brindley, who's playing at the World Championships. And we're also going to check in with Max McCue, who is an intriguing Blue Jackets prospect that could be doing important things for the Monsters this time next year. So I'm just going to get into my conversation with Sebastian. We're talking all about a Russian prospect today, not the Russian prospect you might expect, but someone who is, again, kind of an underrated prospect. I think it's a name that's been coming up more and more as we get closer to the draft, and it's another personal favorite of head scout of drama prospect, Sebastian High. So I've brought Sebastian on, and we're going to talk a little bit about why he has Chernyshov ranked so much higher than basically every other prospecting platform out there. But, everyone has that. That's what I love about this kind of time of year, is that everyone has their favorites and everyone will fight to the death for why their ranking is the correct ranking and why everyone else is wrong. And it's a lot of fun from someone who kind of only really sees the edges of kind of the work that these prospect experts do. But what kind of player is Igor Chernyshov? First up.
Yeah, so he is a 6'2", 196-pound right shot left winger out of Russia who split this season between the KHL and the MHL, so the Russian junior rank. And through 22 games in junior hockey, he logged 13 goals and 28 points. And in the KHL, he played 34 games. And scored 3 goals and 1 assist for 4 points. But do not let the point total scare you off there in the KHL. He was an excellent KHLer in his draft year, which was really impressive. He had a tremendous defensive impact. He was probably he's easily a top 3 best defensive forward playing against professional competition in this draft class, alongside the likes of Konsta Helenius and Michael Brandsack-Newgard. And on top of that, he also had a great impact in transition. Very reliable in exiting the zone, in the defensive zone, and getting into the offensive zone with control. Beyond just those areas of strength, he's an excellent puck handler. He's really powerful and physical, and he has a wicked shot. He has all the makings of a modern NHL power forward, in my opinion. A player that you can trust in the defensive zone, who can lead the breakout, who uses his handling in tandem with his mobility and his shooting ability to create off the rush, but on the cycle is able to post himself at the net front or take up the bumper position or even be a half-wall shooting threat. We just came out with an episode over at Locked on NHL Prospects where I broke down the top 5 goal scorers in this draft class, and Igor Chernyshov came in at number 4 on that list. He's a really good goal scorer, very projectable in the way he scores goals. It's not just a heavy release. He has a very heavy wrist shot, very dangerous snapshot as well. But it's the way he's able to integrate that in with the rest of his tools, the way he's able to leverage his handling ability to access space, to change angles of release, to get to the dangerous areas of the ice. And you can also score those really dirty goals, whether it be a rebound or a tip around the net front, or a quick snapshot as a bumper on the power play, the versatility in how he's able to score goals, and just like the amount of tools that he already has that are already very, very good that support the way he scores goals, in my opinion, makes him a very projectable NHL goal scorer and a player I'd be happy to swing on in that middle of the teams. I will say we don't necessarily have him significantly higher than everybody else anymore. He's listed as having been ranked 10th overall by Dobber Prospects on Elite Prospects, but that was our February ranking. He fell more towards like 14 or 15 in April, and he's probably going to stick around that level, which is right in line with where he's ranked by the likes of Elite Prospects or Craig Button or Bob McKenzie, but he hasn't been talked about very much. He's a type of player that a lot of people have ranked in that like late teens, early 20s range, and it's just like, oh yeah, he's good, he's really good, he's big and can score, he's good. But like, there should be more hype behind this player, in my opinion, because in terms of the style he plays, he's kind of in line stylistically, not in terms of projection or player comp, but stylistically along the lines of like a Mikko Rantanen or Yuri Slafkovsky, but leaning a lot heavier for goal scoring and playmaking. The playmaking game is an area of weakness with Chernyshov at this stage in his career, at least relative to the rest of his toolkit. He often telegraphs his passes. Even on 2-on-1s, he can really telegraph that he's going to choose the pass, and it just gets broken up. So he's going to have to integrate a lot more deception in the way he passes the puck. He's mechanically a decent passer. It's the way he disguises that and is able to deceive through the hands into the playmaking that needs a lot of work. But he has the handling ability and the goal-scoring threat to really create that type of deception, to open up passing lanes, to explore his playmaking creativity. But that has not come this season, especially because he was playing a lot of minutes in the KHL and wasn't getting all the ice time in the NHL, like a player like Ivan Demidov, for instance, to really test out the breadth of his toolkit. But he was really able to show just how strong his foundation is of habits off the puck and in the defensive zone. That, in my opinion, makes him a very projectable NHL player, and I don't really see many worlds where he doesn't end up, at the very least, being an entertaining and effective bottom six piece.
We're going to get back to my conversation with Sebastian about Igor Chernyshov in just a second. But first, I've got to tell you about Indeed. There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build your team. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. It's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's powerful hiring platform can help you do it all. They've got powerful tools that help you find matched candidates to really streamline hiring. And with Indeed Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. I only use Indeed when I'm unlucky enough to be looking for a job. Indeed is the website that I use, so I can only imagine it is just as good if you are hiring. So join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer is good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Well, the good news about that is the Blue Jackets have approximately 700 playmakers and like 1.5 goal scorers. So this could be a real kind of meeting of the two things here. I feel like young KHL players are so difficult to project if you really only have like the stat sheet to look at, because I'm like, okay, he played 34 games. How many of those games did he play 12 seconds of? Because a lot of KHL teams don't typically play their young players a ton. So it's really tough to kind of get and look and like, oh, okay, he only scored 3 goals, but how many of those games did he actually play like a real amount of? And also,
he did play a real amount because he was just like a shutdown defensive forward. So he was playing a lot of like fourth line minutes. He was getting like, I'd say 1 in every 3 games he played, he was playing on the second line. He was seeing a little bit of second power play time, but not very much. But as soon as the playoffs hit, his time on ice plummeted as well. So there definitely is something along those lines as well. But I would say, I think he deserved to have more points and more goals than he ended up having. And I watched a fair few, like at least a handful of the KHL games where he played upwards of 10 minutes. And his consistency in being able to get those high danger scoring chances and the heaviness behind his release and the handling skill really should have gotten him a couple more points on the board. Like I think I counted at least like 4 to 5 posts in those 5 games that he played. Like he wasn't necessarily always getting the lucky bounces, but I'd be looking at him to take a really significant step in production as a D+1 because he now has that experience in the KHL. He knows the pace at which the league plays, and he also knows in which areas of the ice he has a bit more space and time to work with. And I think that he'll be able to at the very least chip in with like a third of a point a game next season rather than a measly 4 through 30-something games.
Yeah, this might be getting kind of a little bit too inside baseball here, but something that I've kind of been talking about on Locked on Blue Jackets the past, I've been doing a lot of my player reviews for the season, and Dmitry Voronkov was a guy that I just looked at and like, right, okay, how do they get the most out of this guy in future seasons? And he played best when he had a Russian on his line. That being said, I don't know that him and Kirill Marchenko are kind of in the same tier of player. Igor Chernyshov is kind of up in the air right now. He doesn't have a contract. I assume that they're going to bring him back. But again, will he be playing in the top 6? Will he be playing in the bottom 6? Having someone like Chernyshov come in and add to that kind of small Russian mafia that the Blue Jackets are building with their prospect pool, someone to play on that in that bottom 6 with Voronkov and maybe get kind of the best out of both players is something that kind of is really interesting to me. Is that like, do you kind of see that as a potential pairing that could work with Voronkov just being enormous and mean and Chernyshov being the goal scorer?
Definitely. And I think like one nice thing about Igor Chernyshov is he could be an NHL bottom 6 guy within like a year and a half, 2 years, right? So the timeline of getting him into that bottom 6 capacity isn't too far away. I'm not quite sure what his contract situation is looking like, but I know it's not super long term. But we'll see if he re-signs on a long-term deal after being drafted, but that's obviously always up in the air. But I do think that integrating him into that bottom 6 a bit earlier, getting him those NHL reps will be a really good stepping stone for him to establish himself in the top 6 potentially as a goal scorer, as a power forward, as a potential offensive driver, and also a high-end defensive piece. But the nice thing is he can start out as like a third line winger playing second PK minutes because those are strengths in his game. He's able to do all those things very well. So we'll get the coach's trust in those areas and he'll be able to build off of that. And playing with a guy like Dmitry Voronkov is going to give him space to do so. Of all the things Voronkov can do, giving space to his line mates through the sheer size that he is.
Because he's enormous and he just creates space or he'll go through you. It's a lot of fun.
Exactly. Yeah. He just creates craters in the offensive zone that his teammates can go and plop themselves into. And Chernyshov is going to love that. And Chernyshov himself can do a similar type of thing to a lesser degree. He's also really powerful. He's also very strong. He makes those hard drives to the net. He gets himself in those dirty areas. But if he has a bit more space to work with at the NHL level, that'll make the goal scoring also come a lot more easily than if he were having to score from in tight under pressure right out of the gate.
So we kind of talked about this a little bit where we did the profile on Alphonse Frey and like the kind of the down year for Swedes. The Russians are always so hard to predict, obviously, because some teams want to take a risk on them, some teams don't. Like, there was a whole big thing that came out as of the day that we're recording this. Apparently, the Flyers and Matvei Michkov haven't spoken since the draft, which I don't know if that should be concerning or if that's just how Russia works. But it feels like he's the kind of player that could be almost like a Dmitry Simashev type. I know that they're very different players, but Dmitry Simashev obviously went 7th, I want to say.
6th.
Or 12th?
6th.
He went really early in the draft.
He went 6th overall.
Yeah. Someone,
precisely.
And then
like Simashev went 6th and Daniil Boot
they wanted
went
12th.
Brian Bucker
went at 5.
Yeah.
So do you think that kind of a similar thing? And I feel like that happens with Russians specifically, is that they get taken really early if the player that the team actually wanted isn't available. Like if that makes sense, and is that the kind of thing that you could see happening with Chernyshov, of someone else, another goal scoring heavy prospect goes at 9 or 10, let's say, Chernyshov suddenly appears at 10 or 11. Is that kind of could you see a similar thing happening with his game, with his draft position?
I could, in theory. I do expect him to be available a little bit later than I would want him to be, which is a good thing for whatever team will end up picking him. Like the player that like I kind of alluded to there in that role of like a player that stylistically and in terms of frame and profile is a bit similar, that is projected to go higher. That's Michael Brandsegg-Nygård. I don't really see a world where Chernyshov goes over Brandsegg-Nygård. Chernyshov is a slightly better puck handler than MBN, but everything else across the board is more refined and more projectable with Brandsegg-Nygård than it is with Chernyshov. Like the goal scoring, I'd say like Chernyshov has a slight edge there too, but it's very slight. Brandsegg-Nygård's also a great goal scorer, but MBN's like the best forechecker available in this draft. He's the best defensive forward available in this draft. He's a wicked goal scorer. He has really good hands. He gets to the dangerous areas. He's already an NHLer in terms of how he plays the game. So at least in my eyes, even as somebody that likes Chernyshov a lot as a prospect, I would not consider selecting him above Michael Brandsegg-Nygård. But if Brandsegg-Nygård ends up going higher than projected, and currently he's not even projected to be a top 15 guy if we're looking at Bob McKenzie's board, but if he does end up going in that like 9 to 11 range, I could see Chernyshov dropping between 13 and 16. I think it's possible. I don't think it's overly likely. My guess is Chernyshov ends up somewhere between 19 and 28. But again, there's always a lot of wiggle room with that, and especially in this year's draft class, it is a horror to rank. Like you can talk to just about any scout, and it's just like, yeah, I only have headaches. Like I feel like with time we're getting some more distinct tiers, but those tiers are still very large, and within those tiers, it's just absolute mayhem. So I'm very curious to see how draft day goes, because it's going to be a ton of wild cards. And I'm sure that nobody's going to predict like the right top 15 in the order, because that would be a stroke of genius and significant luck.
It feels a little bit, obviously the 2020 draft was wild or the 2021 draft, excuse me, was wild for so many reasons. But I feel like I'm getting the same sort of vibe where I'm like, well, this guy could go 4th overall, or he could go 24th overall. It feels like, well, okay, Owen Power is probably going to go first. Matty Benez is probably going to go second. And then after that,
who knows?
Mason McTavish at 3rd. Why the heck not? And I'm getting the similar sort of vibes with this draft, in that I've kind of, every single person I look at, every single mock draft I look at, they've got Celebrini first, usually Demidov second. And then after that, it's just complete carnage and chaos. Like no one seems to know what to do with this draft, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I would say I think Levshinov is another player that I'd be surprised if he's still available at 4th overall. I think he's going either at 2 or at 3, but beyond that, it is so wide open. Obviously, Anton Salayev is a top 4 candidate as well on draft day, which I can't say I fully am aligned with in seeing that. But he has some exceptional tools, so why not, I guess. But yeah, it is so wide open, and there's so many different swings that I can understand other scouts having significantly higher than I have them. Like I currently have Cole Eiserman ranked 15th overall. I understand it if a scout has him at 25, and I understand if a scout has him at 5. Like there are arguments to be made anywhere in that range, and it is just so wide open. Or even a player like Konsta Helenius, super smart.
I've seen people talking about Konsta Helenius as a candidate for 4th overall, which seems wild to me.
Or 25th. I've seen a couple scouts, not many, but a couple scouts have him significantly lower, because the upside is many question marks around that. He doesn't really have any standout tool that is significantly above average. He's slightly above average at just about everything, but the question is that going to be enough to allow him to be a real capable top 6 player that makes a difference offensively? And I think that there are valid questions around that. That said, he's so refined defensively. He's so intelligent on puck, and I think the playmaking has some room to grow because he makes such good decisions with the puck on his stick. The creativity could use a little bit more fostering in the upcoming seasons, but he's a player I currently have ranked at 12th overall, but within the last month, he's found himself as high as 8 and as low as 15 on my board as well.
Yeah, there's so much happening out there with the draft, and I feel like it changes every single day. I want to kind of zero in on the Blue Jackets, and we talked a little bit the last time we had you on the show about who you would take at 4th overall, who could be available at 4th overall, etc., etc. The Blue Jackets prospect pool is pretty good. I think it's fair to say. I know Dropper Prospects has them ranked, I think, as the 5th best prospect pool as recently as April 2024, which I think is obviously, they were higher, but I think Kent Johnson graduated, Cole Sillinger graduated. A couple other players graduated from that pool, I think. But are the Blue Jackets in a position right now, in terms of what their prospect pool is, can they just basically ignore positional need and go for best player available? I feel like 4th overall, there's an argument that you should go best player available regardless of positional need, but are the Blue Jackets kind of uniquely suited to... Well, we've got a ton of defensive prospects. We've got a ton of forward prospects. We're kind of set in goal. Not that there's even any kind of conversation that you should take a goalie at 4th overall, because people are cowards. But they have a pretty solid goalie prospect pool. Again, it's ironic that we're talking about this in the Chernyshov episode, because Russian goalies, we have lots of them. But are the Blue Jackets kind of uniquely suited to just being like, well, we're just going to take the absolute best player that we possibly can, regardless of position, regardless of profile? They don't need a defensive defenseman. They don't need an offensive defenseman. They don't need a two-way forward. They don't need a power forward, blah, blah, blah. Am I right in kind of saying that the Blue Jackets can kind of just take whoever they want at 4th overall and it doesn't really matter?
Yes, I would say there's perhaps a slight lean, at least from my perspective, towards a forward that can help drive the offense. I think that, sure, you have your high-end pieces like Adam Fantilli and Kent Johnson. Obviously, not had a bit of a down year this season, but when he's on his game, he's a real offensive driver as well. But I think
if he plays more than 8 minutes a game, he'll be great.
That's true, right?
We don't need to
start the season in the AHL.
Get into that on this episode, But if it was me, I probably would play him more than 8 minutes a game. But I'm not the head coach of the Blue Jackets, so
that would probably be wise if you want him to progress in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, I think I would put a slight lean on forward. So I think my top 3 draft board for the Blue Jackets would be, if he's available, Ivan Demidov at 1, and then probably TJ Ginla at 2 and Caden Lindstrom at 3, but 2 and 3, take your pick, whichever preference. There's not too big of a difference there. But again, as you mentioned, they can go with just about every position. I think left D would be the one where I'd be scratching my head a little bit, just because with Zach Werenski locked up long-term at a massive dollar price and Denton Matejchuk graduating to pro hockey now, I don't really see a need to spend this 4th overall pick on a left D, especially because the left D that would be in talks here is Anton Salayev. If you're going for a guy like Zeev Buyev instead, then sure, I'd be more than happy to do that instead. But even then, stylistic similarities to Denton Matejchuk. But again, you want to maximize your value. So at the end of the day, you don't have to make your depth chart look as cohesive as possible on draft day. That's not what draft day is for. You want to add value into your depth chart. So yes, I would say that as a whole, Columbus is better suited than most organizations on draft day. So just take the swing on whichever player they believe will be the most impactful at the end of the day. And if that ends up being a left shot defenseman or a centerman, or heck, who knows, maybe a goaltender, maybe Carter George impressed them so much at the U18s for Team Canada that they ended up going 4th overall. That would be very entertaining and very fun. And I'm going to be in Vegas for the draft, so I would love to see that happen. Just the sheer entertainment value, it would be fitting for that city. But within the reasonable realms of what's going to happen, I think that it's likely going to be a forward or a big defenseman. If Artem Levshunov falls to number 4, which I'm not expecting to happen, but if he does, he's the exact style of player that I think the Blue Jackets management group would just look at and be like, we already have David Jiricek, but if you're giving us Levshunov, why not? We're just going to take that and run, I guess. But yeah, all these doors are open. All the possibilities are there. And it's going to be really interesting to see who ends up being the general manager for the Blue Jackets on draft day, because they're going to have the opportunity to add a real franchise cornerstone and already set up their mark a little bit on the organization. Obviously, you have to listen to the scouts that have watched these players all season long, but the GM will still have some type of say in the final decision, and whoever they end up picking will end up making a bit of a stamp on what this organization looks like for the following 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I feel like I believe that they still have all of this, like the entire scouting department is intact. And I know that Jarmo Kekalainen, his whole thing was that he was a scout before he was a GM. Drafting was his whole thing, and he was pretty good at it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how much of that was Kekalainen and how much of that was just him being smart enough to listen to a pretty solid scouting staff. But yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense what you're saying in that they have preferences, but there's not like I feel like Chicago needs to get a defenseman.
Or Demidov.
Demidov is tough to pass on, but I feel like they already have so many small wingers, small scoring wingers.
For sure. It doesn't make logistical sense, but the opportunity to pair Ivan Demidov with Connor Bedard is just absurd.
Yeah.
And I think Kyle Davidson's the type of GM that would just be like, screw it. We're just going to do it. Figure it out later. But I would concur. I think it's about a 50-50 between Levshunov and Demidov. And I think that the closer we get to draft day, the more rumors we're going to hear about Levshunov being the guy at number 2.
Yeah, and then obviously, again, it's the similar thing with the Ducks. Obviously, them moving Jamie Drysdale. There's kind of a hole on defense there. Do they take Salayev? Again, do they pass on Demidov? It's tough to pass on. It's a tough sell to be like, hey, you should take this big defenseman over a guy like Ivan Demidov. But again, they're kind of stacked ridiculously so at forward, and more so now that they picked up Cutter Gauthier, so it's...
Yeah.
The Blue Jackets aren't in kind of the same position as those two teams, I think. I think they're really good. If they pick a defenseman, fine. If they pick a forward, fine. Pick a goalie, we might have a conversation. But we love goalies here on Locked on Blue Jackets, so I'm not going to... I wouldn't necessarily go with Carter George, but we'll see. I like Ryerson Linders a lot. But that's my goalie 2 cents. That's my goalie opinion is that I like Linders. I like Linders a lot. So... we'll see where he goes. He's someone that I'm targeting with the 36th overall pick. I think that will be fun. But let's finish off with. I said that we would talk a little bit of like Blue Jacket specific prospects, and as much as I would love to make you talk about Luca Pinelli again, he's not playing right now. He is with the Cleveland Monsters on an ATO, which is fun. He might get into a game, especially since the injury bug seems to be coming back with a vengeance to Cleveland. But Gavin Brindley, late addition to the US roster, and they've decided to play him over both Ryan Leonard and I believe Will Smith was, again, as of the day of recording this, Will Smith was a scratch for Team USA. I am surprised by this because as much as I love Gavin Brindley, I don't know that he would be my first choice to pick out of those 3 young players in terms of who I want on the national team. But like, how has his game kind of impressed you? Kind of the tail end of the season. Obviously, he's done something to make the Team USA think that he deserves to be there. Like, what's your feelings on Gavin Brindley getting to play for the men's World Championships and how he's looked while he's been there?
Well, he has a very strong record of consistently making a big impact for Team USA in those big tournaments in the IHF. So I think that would be one thing of like there's some familiarity within hockey, USA hockey, with him in those big tournaments. And the other thing is the role. Like Will Smith is a dynamic offensive driver. What he isn't is a player that you can plug into a bottom line who's going to be like your most energetic checking forward if you want him to be, and on the puck can create as well. Like Ryan Leonard's perhaps a little bit more in that mold stylistically, and I'd probably select Leonard over Brindley for that type of role, but it's neck and neck. These are players that I'm a massive fan of. I don't think it's really a wrong choice between those 3 players of which player ends up getting those minutes in the tournament. And I've caught one game where Brindley played at the World Championships, and he looked great. I mean, he didn't play too much, but when he was on the ice, he made an impact, bringing a ton of energy, a ton of pace, and just the combination of those types of that work rate, those refined habits, that like forechecking pressure, back checking pressure, but also the on puck skill. He's so dynamic with the puck. He likes to try things out. He's dynamic. And he's going to be a really fun player in Columbus in just about no time at all. I think he could be an NHLer out of camp next season. And seeing him and Fantilli together, even if it might just be in the power play to start rather than at even strength, sign me up. That's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to see Blue Jackets hockey get more entertaining as the year progresses.
That's the hope. That was going to be my follow-up question: is he a Blue Jacket this October, or is he a monster this October? I know what my pick would be, but is it better for him to play 1 million minutes in the AHL, or to potentially get like the Kent Johnson treatment this season, where sometimes he plays 16 minutes and sometimes he plays 8 minutes, and sometimes he gets healthy scratched for no reason at all, you know?
Yeah, like again, it's always a tough debate. I do think that players getting minutes is very important for their development. So I think if your options are playing Brindley 8 minutes a night on the fourth line or giving him top line minutes in the AHL, I'd be giving him the AHL opportunity. But that said, I don't think it's impossible that he just starts out in the top nine right out of the gate. And I would prefer to see him in a top nine role if he's set for that type of role out of camp. Compared to the AHL. So
You'd
a
be
lot of that
stupid
comes
to
down
not
to
at least try him with
exactly
Fantilli to begin with.
for
Like, he's got a
sure. Oh my God, of course.
built-in best friend chemistry. Like, that was the whole
Yes,
reason that they drafted both. Like, not the whole reason, but I think, that's why they took
it helped.
Brindley over for a player like Andrew Cristal, for example, was they were like, right, we have best friends, we'll stick them together and hopefully profit from it. So you'd be stupid not like. Who knows? Maybe in 5 months' time or whenever the season starts, I'll be sitting here tearing my hair out because they refuse to play Fantilli and Brindley together. But for my money,
Likely, but we'll see.
it's too easy, It's too
Yeah,
easy.
yeah, for sure.
There's another prospect that I want to ask you about that I didn't pre-warn you about, so I'm just going to throw this out there cold. Max McCue is heading to the Memorial Cup with the London Knights. Obviously, he was I believe, a San Jose Sharks third-round draft pick that they didn't sign, so he became a UFA, signed with the Blue Jackets. I believe is aging out of London, so will be with he will be turning pro as soon as the Memorial Cup is over. I'm assuming he's going to be an impact piece for the Monsters, but like, what kind of insights do you have on Max McCue, who just wrapped up a pretty darn good playoff season with the London Knights, who admittedly, stupid good team. They had, I think, they had 6 of the top 9 OHL champion, like playoff scorers on that team. But how do we feel about Max McCue as a player?
I think he's going to be a really solid AHLer. I think the NHL upside, we're going to see some question. Like we'll see with time. He's like stylistically the type of player that could be a bit of a late bloomer in how he's able to add some more offensive impact with time. But I mean, this is a player like he's 21 years old right now, playing like second to third line minutes with London. And he put up just under a point a game in the regular season and just over a point a game in the playoffs. But even last year, as a 19/20-year-old, he scored 13 goals, 39 points in 58 games. So the record of production with him has been a little bit choppier. That said, I've liked him when I've seen him this season. He's been very good for London, but he's also been a 21-year-old playing in the OHL. So for me, that's a very difficult mold of player to kind of evaluate, of a player that made a significant jump in terms of production and offensive impact in their final OHL season, while also being one of the oldest players on the most dominant team in the OHL. It's very difficult to kind of like find the barometer of how you might value that in terms of potential NHL projection. But at the very least, as like a potential bottom 6 AHL contributor out of the gate next season, I could totally see that. And also with the experience of having played in as high pressure an environment as London, you are getting a kind of training for professional hockey for the AHL level right there in junior hockey, which is a very unique environment, which I don't think hurts whatsoever. But yeah, he's a bit of like a primary playmaker, has a decent motor on him. He's 6'1", 174 pounds. He doesn't have like that dynamic offensive skill that can give him that like top 9 NHL upside, but he might top out as like a fourth liner in the NHL. And if you get that with a player that you just got as a free agent, that's found money. But again, like we'll see. He's one of many players in this system, and just giving him a shot in the AHL along with a bunch of other players that will be making that leap next season will be interesting to see.
Yeah, he's kind of like you say, he's found money. They signed him for free. They didn't use a draft pick on him. They basically were like, hey, why not? We'll give this player a shot. And, the Blue Jackets have a handful of players that are kind of in the same boat. Most of them are college free agents. So Josh Dunn came to us as a college free agent. Hunter McCown was the last season's college free agent. Nick Blankenberg, who I'm still really high on. As a potential top 4 NHL defenseman. Am I biased? Maybe. Am I right? Who knows? But they have a lot of Owen Sillinger is another one. He came out of college as a free agent. So like the Blue Jackets have had AHL success with these players. I'm not out here expecting Max McCue to necessarily be a game breaker, but if they can get a fourth line forward out of a player that they got for free, that feels like a success to me. We'll have to have you back on the show probably after the draft now, and we'll talk about the stupid things that the Blue Jackets did at the draft or the great things that the Blue Jackets did at the draft. Who knows?
Excellent.
But it'll definitely be one of those two. It's either going to be a disaster or it's going to be another, oh my God, how did the Blue Jackets walk away with X, Y, and Z? And there's really no way to know. It could be Luca Pinelli in the 4th round all over again. I really hope he gets some AHL playoff time. I really do. We're running long here, so we can't get into how much we both love Luca Pinelli's game, but we are legally obligated to mention him at least once when Sebastian comes on the show. So yes. If people want to kind of learn more about prospects, if they want to get your rankings, things like that, where can they find you and your work online?
High_Sebastian on Twitter. That's where I centralize everything. I'm going to come out with my personal top 100 rankings in early June, along with a big write-up for explaining the ranking of every single player, as well as what they project in terms of role and upside in the NHL. And also over at Dobber Prospects, we'll be coming out with a top 128 ranking, which is the draft team that I'm able to lead alongside Hattie Kalakesh. And it's an excellent group of scouts over there. We do everyone there is just extremely hardworking, and it'll be the final ranking of a really big season of work. So we're excited to present that to everybody. And last but not least, the sister channel of this channel, Locked On NHL Prospects, which I do alongside, again, Hattie Kalakesh. We do a lot of work together. And we're coming out with a lot of content now in the coming weeks and the next month leading up to the draft. We came out with a mock draft and a breakdown of Bob McKenzie's top 15 rankings last week. So that'll be some interesting content that you could dig into. But keep your eyes open, and we'll be doing a lot of draft content in the months after the draft as well. So we'll do a full breakdown of whatever Columbus ends up doing on draft day as well when the time comes. But my work's kind of strewn around all those different places, but it's all centralized on Twitter.
Perfect. Yeah, Locked On Blue Jackets should be your first listen of the day, but Locked On NHL Prospects should definitely be your second listen of the day. Thanks for coming to talk prospects with me, Sebastian. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And that's all I've got for you today. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking all about Alexander Texier and his return to the NHL, how his first season back after taking most of 2 seasons out went, what his new contract could look like, and indeed if he will be a Blue Jacket in October and where he fits into the lineup if he is. So that's tomorrow's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter and on Instagram. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening, and until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.